Welcome to the show, Derek. Today we're diving into the future of marketing, where data meets engineering discipline. We'll explore nanochomp's unique bytes methodology, then move on to the high-stakes challenge of cultural change, and finally discuss the future of approachable AI. Derek, you're the CEO of nanochomp. Let's start with your story.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having us on. I really appreciate that. But yeah, my background's pretty interesting. From Metro Detroit area, so in Michigan, it's a part of the United States. It looks kind of like a glove. And I grew up really working on cars, being fascinated with cars. So I went into engineering, obviously. And if you're from the Michigan area, you go into engineering and you come out and you're like, you know what, I'm going to be working on race cars. It's going to be amazing. And then what you learn when you exit university, the life doesn't give you the path that you thought, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to work for SVT. This is going to be great. And then my first job out of school was creating a process to determine if a bolt had hexavalent chromium. So like not awesome at all, right?
Yeah.
It's just the absolute nightmare. And then you start learning that like everything you thought about your engineering path or what you were going to do, it's not necessarily true, but there's something you can learn along the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in university, electrical engineering and computer science, came out right away, started working on the automotive space, ended up sorting hexavalent chromium bolts. But outside of that, we started working on some really interesting control systems. We started working on like hybrid drive vehicles, which was, early 2000s. That was pretty new technology. And we started working on like dual clutch technology. And then I got into race cars. So we finally did cross the gap of
We got
combining
there.
all that stuff together. Yeah, yeah. But like, the path to get to where you want to go is not always direct. That's for sure.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
well,
but man,
that's actually really cool, Derek. Your core philosophy, you shared a fascinating insight that hard work doesn't equal promotion in corporate America. How did that realization influence your decision to build NanoChomp around a
yeah.
structured, data-driven methodology like Bytes, rather than relying on subjective effort?
Really interesting point. Yeah, that's a good grab. So you and I had a conversation where I said, what's the last thing you changed your mind about? That's important. And that was one of the things that I changed my mind about. Being an engineer by background, a lot of times you think, everything's performance based and everything is competence based. So the better engineer I am, the more competent I am, the more competence I exude, the more I'm going to get promoted. I'm going to become, VP. That's who gets promoted, the most competent, the most skilled. And then you learn that's not true, but it's not true in a different way than you think. And it's like this element that you end up missing, especially as an engineer, is warmth. So there's two levers you need to pull: warmth and competence. If you're the most competent person in the world, people will tolerate you being kind of a jerk, kind of cold. But as soon as you're like not, you're just really good, they don't tolerate that anymore, right? There has to be this balance. But if you are really, really warm, really approachable, you're humble, you communicate in a different way, and you meet people where they are, that gets you promotable. So what you see over and over again is a lot of times you'll be in your career and you're like, man, I'm crushing, I'm doing great. And you keep seeing people getting promoted over top of you. You might be pulling the wrong lever. You're like, oh, if I just work harder, if I just, try better, if I get more engineering skills, if I get more technical skills, that's going to fix it. It's probably not.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably gapped in your competence. No, not your competence, but your warmth. You're probably not approachable. People find your likability prickly. So when we looked at that, I noticed that that was happening in my career, and I changed my approach. I started focusing a lot more on communications. And then when I worked with my business partner, we really paired two pieces of the brain, right? She's really heavily marketing focused. She's a marketer, a journalist. She's done a lot of really great strategy stuff. And then I've done all this data driven engineering. And so we started combining those things into building a strategy, testing it with data, and iterating. Over time, we start finding things that we think are going to work. Maybe don't, but you got to like let go of that. You got to be, not let that impact you as much as a lot of people do. A lot of people are afraid to test, afraid to try things because, well, what if it goes wrong? And when you take this type of approach, it going wrong is kind of the point. So we built our business around how do we take a data-driven approach to things, but with approachable AI. When you come into a meeting, based again on like competence versus warmth, if I come into a client meeting and say, what we're going to do is we're going to take your data and we are going to run it through a k-means clustering algorithm. We've got an artificial neural network that's going to break this into its individual parts. That doesn't mean anything to anybody, right? But I might be the most competent person in that room that nobody listens to. So really focusing on, to your point, you said approachable AI. We use those terms too. What is the outcome? What are they trying to receive? What are they trying to get? If they say, oh, how does it work? They don't want to hear, well, I have a convolutional neural network that's breaking things into its individual components and it's got 5 hidden layers. That's not what they want to hear. They want to hear, well, I'm taking your data and I'm pushing it through our algorithm and we're going to fine tune it a little bit. And this is how we get your outcome. We don't explain all the stuff in the middle. We got to think warmth, got to think outcome. We have to think about our audience. And that took a long time, admittedly, a long time for me to work through and learn. But that's, as an entrepreneur, and you're seeing that. That's how you're going to be able to attract more business, attract more marketing focus, and then not let your overcompetence in your world get in the way of getting a project because you're lacking that one.
Yeah. And I definitely see that. And especially like since I'm a software engineer as well, so I know what you mean. We as engineers, we need to go down all the way to like the
Yeah.
bolts. So having to explain something just high level and them just taking it is super alien to us. But that's a
Yeah, yeah,
great,
yeah.
powerful foundation. I'd like to talk about the bytes framework.
Yeah, yeah. So when we put this together, we borrowed it from a few different places. And when we put a canvas together. So if anyone's familiar with what's called the business model canvas or the lean canvas, I really loved that approach. And I've man, since university, we've approached it for like feasibility. But effectively, we look everything through how can we create a blueprint for innovating, testing, and executing strategies, right? And when we come into a business, a lot of times the first place we touch a business is with the marketing team. And they've got a data problem, or they've got a product problem, or a solution problem, or they just want growth, right? There's all kinds of different ways we come in. But invariably, we end up kicking over rocks and finding other root causes by using this framework. And I'll send you a link to it. But we have three phases effectively to our product portfolio, our engagement, and we use the Bytes canvas to do that. Step one, or we're working with a technical term or team, we call it phase zero. It's all about discovery, goal setting. We kind of come in, do an audit, build a strategy. Phase two is taking that strategy and building it into something executable. We use an agile framework to help companies get good results, make sprint plans of all the things we need to do, what success criteria looks like. And then the third piece is we start finding out what workflows we can create and what is automatable, what's repeatable, and how do we inject AI into the business. And that's what you work on too. Is what is the most effective way to make lean teams more efficient? How do we give them a white collar combine harvester, right, to make
Mhm.
people more efficient? But that canvas we use is really focused on what does the market presence look like? What is the customer segment we're going for? What channels are we approaching? And what value prop are you trying to deliver? 0.9 times out of 10, we see people fail the value prop test. And what I mean by that is if they were to try to explain that to my mom, they'd have a really rough time, right? Or it'd be so long that you can't do it. So, like, how do you make a value prop statement that's like, we help X do Y by Z? Give me that. And then we can, reshape it. And then from there, you can tell that value prop through your channels and get your customer segments. A lot of people fail that test. And then again, the other part of the Bytes canvas is once you have all that, how do you actually do it? Like, how do you move the shovel? What key partnerships, what key activities, what key relationships are required for you to execute this? And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people underestimate that too. They take this, I'll use a really dated reference. They take this field of dreams approach. Like, if you build it, they will come. And that's not true, right? You need to think about, like, what is it going to take to not only construct this, maintain it, but how do we continue to get the voice of the customer from a market perspective so we can reach that customer, resonate with that customer, and deliver value to them?
Wow. So it's essentially bringing like the engineering rigor to marketing. Could you walk us through a quick example of a client who moved from guesswork to using the Bytes framework? And what was the most immediate, tangible change in their decision making process?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So I think a lot of people, they will intuitively be like, "Oh, we all know who our customer is, and we all know what we do. We all know what our value prop is." And we're like, "Great, great. I love that you said that. Okay, I want you to tell me what the value prop is. Just pick one random person on the call, and they'll kind of ramble and they'll get there. And then someone else is like, "Well, I actually say it like this." It's like, "Okay, great." Great. They're all different. They're all different variations of it. And then you start going through their messaging on their web pages and how they talk, and it's all different. Right. And so almost step one, we can tighten up like what the offer is, what the value prop is, what the message is, and how we're communicating that to their segments. And when we've worked with a lot of clients, cleaning that up and cleaning the messaging on the web page up, step one, ends up boosting conversions really quickly. The other thing people do is everyone's heard of SEO. So they'll write like search engine optimized content. They'll make blog content, but they're not thinking about, things that maybe you and I are on board with. It's like not only are search engines crawling your stuff, but OpenAI, Perplexity, the top links on Google now, it's like it replaces it with an AI a generated answer versus the links. So if your content isn't using the right words, you're kind of in bad shape. So like these are when we break things apart, we're really looking for what is the highest impact, lowest effort thing we can do. You and I've talked about this before. It's like take all the things in the world that we could accomplish and how do we sort them? How do we rank them by the highest impact to lowest impact? Great. Take the high impact stuff, the low impact we'll throw away. And then of this, what is the easiest thing to do? Put that on top. And that's kind of a foundation of how we leverage our framework and how we leverage Agile. Like you to talk about, you're a software developer, you've done Agile, you've gone through sprints, you've used Kanban. Same story. Easy stuff that's high impact, put it on the top, start doing it. And then work your way down to the harder shit as you go or harder stuff as you go. And you'll realize like this low impact stuff, a lot of people like, oh man, I got to eat the frog. I got to do this first. And it's like, do you? Or is that an obsolete goal potential? So we see that almost in every client. The other thing that we work through is a lot of clients are flying blind, and we'll use airplane
Hmm.
references. They're flying what we would call VFR. They're not even looking at instruments because they don't have any of it there. So they're doing a lot of things based on intuition. They're doing it like, oh, this will probably work. Or they're using words and phrases that are internal to their organization, but not external to what people are searching for on an AI tools or on Google. We had a client that was calling a product internally, they were calling it structured cable. And we're like,
Hmm.
oh, what's structured cable? And it was rope light, like glowing lights, so illuminated light that's flexible that you put. No one on
Okay.
earth calls it structured cable other than them. But nowhere on their page did they talk about like linear RGB lighting, right? So nobody that was actually searching for their product would find it because they were calling it the wrong thing. But they'd always called it that. So that's what they called it because they always called it that. So you end up with a lot of that. And then once you get past the data piece of it, you start putting the data systems in place. And now we can say, okay, now we can have a benchmark. Now we can pull a lever. Now we can see what changed. And
Yeah.
until you get to that place, you're just guessing, right? So
Yeah.
when we implement that framework, we do a lot of work to see what's reality today versus what can tomorrow look like. And then how do we map a path there fast?
I love that. That is amazing. You make it sound so simple. Going back to when you said businesses are like flying blind or like VFR, as you said, sometimes businesses can be overwhelmed with data, but they
Yeah.
lack the insights. What is
Yeah.
the single biggest operational bottleneck you find when a new client comes to you with messy siloed data? And how does that data messiness directly impact their sales cycle?
That's a really good question. And I think there's a couple big problems like with the marketing data, with the sales data, with their operations data, right? Like their manufacturing data. We have a client that is putting an operations team in place right now because they can't tell you how much raw material they have or how much inventory they have. They have a homebrew kind of spreadsheet manufacturing, ERP. So we see that kind of data. But then there's a really interesting one that happens with marketing data that that's bumpy that we experience 9.5 times out of 10 or 9 times out of 10 people will try to set up Google Analytics and they'll try to set up Google Tag Manager, and a lot of times they will accidentally or inadvertently either ignore events or duplicate them. So
Hmm.
events are reporting twice. So a lot of times what happens is then they'll set up Google Ads and they'll start doing pay per click, and the conversion event is firing twice. And so now the ROAS number is wrong, right? So not even worse than flying VFR, which is visual flight rules for the non-pilots. They are now looking at the wrong data. Now they're instrumented, but their gauges are telling them the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So identifying that is one of the big things we see. The other thing you see a lot with data equity is somebody might have GE, General Electric as a client, but in their ERP or in their CRM, they'll have GE, General Space Electric, General Electric, one word, capital G, General Electric Ohio, and they will all show up as different accounts, right? And so
Mm.
when they're trying to look at who their biggest clients are, what pond we're trying to fish in, they'll be wrong. So we have a lot of data equity problems that we run into quite a bit. And then probably where you're going with this is like where people warehouse their data, a lot of it, small, medium companies, it's in a spreadsheet. right? Or it's in a series of spreadsheets, which is kind of surprising. But then when you think about it realistically, the average person, the average small team doesn't want to dig through Power BI. They don't know how to use Tableau, right? It's intimidating or confusing, or they don't know how to make a report. So it's easiest to manage it in a spreadsheet. So a lot of people do.
Hmm.
And we've seen very complex data structures that live inside of Google Workspace. And it's tough, right? And it's like, oh, we don't want to break that tool, but you need to get that data in a place where you can use it outside of, Sarah or Sue or Steve's hands, whatever, and to get it to where you can use it. But they don't know how to use a MySQL database. And then even worse is if that breaks or the integration goes down, who on their team's fixing it? So we
Yeah.
run into that quite a bit. So we try to work with them on like, let's use infrastructure and tools that are not overly exotic, that can be can be troubleshot easily with a non-computer scientist, right? So we'll use like Looker Data Studio. And so I think those are big pieces of information that a lot of people run into. It's like we have data, it's living in spreadsheets, it's across a different organization. We have no idea how to integrate it. They don't know how to use BigQuery, right? Like nobody's using BigQuery unless you know how to use BigQuery. Your
Yeah.
average marketer is not using it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you make people dangerous when you have Facebook data, Instagram data, you've got data that's coming from Google Analytics, you've got Google Tag Manager, you got LinkedIn Insight Tag. How can I combine all this? Now, some people will land at HubSpot eventually, and that's great
Hmm.
because you can pull it all together. But a lot of people are still trying to Iron Man that, and they'll open up 12 tools to analyze the data separately versus having a unified view. Is that what you're experiencing right now as well? Are you seeing that in the
Yeah,
market?
yeah, actually, yeah. People just don't know what to prioritize in terms of data as well. They're like, oh, we have this, and then we have like another spreadsheet that has this data. And sometimes they might even show like contradicting like numbers. And
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
well,
yeah.
we don't know what we want to like prioritize. We want to prioritize both, but you don't have the manpower to do so.
The other thing related to that, when you're talking about prioritization, is people will fall victim to what we call the shark attack paradox. I think you and I might have talked
Hmm.
about this, and it's like spurious correlation. So, the shark attack paradox, for anyone who doesn't know, is if you wanted to stop shark attacks, the data the data suggests you ban ice cream sales. Perfect correlation. As ice cream sales increase, shark attacks come up 1 to 1. There's not a better spurious correlation on the market. But ice cream isn't probably causing shark attacks, right? It's not causal, but they're correlative. So what is? Well, it's warm weather, it's by the water, all that kind of stuff. Those kind of go up. Sharks kind of come in, and they're related, but they're not causing each other. There's also another weird one with like butter sales and divorce. There's a really good website on spurious correlation, but we see a lot of people fall victim to the shark attack paradox. They'll see correlation and they'll try to take action on it. And we're like, wait, like, do we know if that's causal or not? Like, well, what do you mean? Obviously, the numbers go together. Maybe. So, getting people to be more data conscious and understand what that data means, that's tricky, right? That's tough, and it's different when you've had to look at things through a different lens for so long, and now you're being forced to be effectively a dollar store data scientist and figure out the decisions I'm going to make on this can have massive impact. And it's tricky to make sure you pull the right lever. So helping people do that is really important. And like as in your point, as a computer scientist working with marketers, it's you have to be able to educate without diving down super deep to a level that just makes people gloss over.
Yeah. Like you said, right? Meeting people to where they're at. Derek, I wanted to talk about like how nanochomp like coaches teams on agile marketing, sprints, testing,
Yeah.
continuous experimentation. What's the biggest cultural hurdle you face in established organizations when trying to shift a marketing team from, I don't know what they usually have, like slow campaign based planning to a
Yeah.
rapid engineering style experimentation cycle?
Yeah, a few big things right away. One is perceived risk and failure. So when a test doesn't go the way they want, they see it as a failure and they're like, we can't do that again. And it's like, it's not what that means. Like, and we talk about you test and iterate, like agile, you test, you iterate, you test, iterate, and you take small bites. By the way, that's where the name of our company comes from. You take a big thing and you break it into small bites. So when we're looking at this, we have to say, okay, well, we're going to test, but we're not going to take a huge 6-month budget and make a big campaign and take a huge swing and see where it is. Like the one company I worked at, I'll let them remain nameless and I'll abstract some of the details. They selected a celebrity spokesperson that was completely away from their target market. Like
I
I'm
see.
gonna, yeah, like their target market was very specific bucket of people, and
Mm-hmm.
their celebrity was a female soccer player who was very far away from their target market. Their average target market would not know who this person was. And they spent a lot of money doing that. But they planned that for like 6 months, 9 months, and they launched that campaign and it didn't execute the way they thought it would. But if you were to test that, there are ways to test that faster. And you could do that within 1, 2, 3 weeks. You could survey the audience. Hey, do you know who this person is? And if their audience comes back and says resoundingly no, maybe that's not who you're going to spend $500,000 this year as your celebrity endorser, right? So you can test that. So we talk about that to help de-risk things. But to your point, the cultural bumps are there because a lot of times budget allocation process is someone will put a budget in for 3 months, a quarter, 6 months, a year, whatever it is. And that has to be a battle plan and it has to be approved and you can't deviate from it. And your end of year bonus might depend on you hitting those goals. But what Agile will do is expose if that goal is obsolete early, right? Like you might be like, whoa, well, this goal is obsolete. So now you're in a predicament. Do I deliberately not go after that one goal because we just proved it's obsolete? Or do I go for it anyway, knowing it's obsolete? So you run into those bumps. But ultimately, most clients, when you sort through the amount of work they need to do to get where we think they need to be, and you say high impact to the top, easy on the top of that, people can see it get wins. So I think the big thing is when you're trying to convert an organization from this big, massive waterfall, showing quick wins is going to be really important. And then even more important than that is again, meeting them where they are, not trying to implement every single element of Agile because like Agile zealots will be like, well, we need to have a stand up every day and we need to have this meeting and we need to have that one and we need to have the artifacts. People are not going to do that.
Yeah.
So if you can make a list of action items, you can get wins and you can make that habit sticky and we can start making progress. But until that point, you're going to hit some bumps. And I think if you try to push the boulder, you're going to fail. So you have to set them up to win and kind of take their dogma and slowly move it to a better solution versus coming in and taking it as a revolution because they will reject it. They will fire you as a vendor and then they won't make any progress at all, right? No one wants that. You want to be able to help. You
No.
want to be able to see this team succeed.
Absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And I love the way you put it, like from it's evolution instead of revolution. That is, I think that's my quote of the day. You're focused on approachable AI, which is practical, lightweight solutions. Where's the biggest challenge in delivering meaningful AI features to clients today? Is it the client's messy data? Is it the difficulty in finding engineers who can bridge that gap? What do you think?
I think it's a really good question. I think a few things. Sometimes people get attached to vanity metrics.
I
Like
see.
they'll be like, "Well, we need this many likes. We need this many of that." And they'll try to collect pieces of data that will relate to vanity versus rating to the goal or conversions or whatever it is. So that can be problematic. I think the other thing is somebody introduced me, and it's embarrassing that it happened so much later in life. Like I thought it should have I probably was introduced to it earlier. There's a principle called Hofstadter's principle. And Hofstadter's principle is everything is going to take longer than you expect, even when you account for Hofstadter's principle. So even when
Mm-hmm.
you account for it taking longer, it's still going to take longer. And I think when you're doing AI stuff, or you're trying to implement AI, that happens. And there's probably two big buckets of AI that we should define here. There's like the predictive analytics, machine learning type AI. And then there's like the large language model stuff now that's really sexy that people are interested in. And a lot of times, people will come to us and be like, well, we want a language model. And initially that wasn't what we were doing. Our AI version was data collection, supervised, unsupervised machine learning, trend detection, anomaly detection, that kind of stuff. But now we have a lot of people that want knowledge based AI. So we take all of their knowledge base, we vectorize it, custom train an AI, or I guess custom train is the wrong word if I'm being pragmatic here. It's we use RAG, so retrieval augmented generation to
Mm-hmm.
create LLMs that work on all their data. So we're doing that kind of stuff too. But it's only as the outcomes are only going to be as good as the data you put in. When you're doing data analytics, people don't realize that data has to be normalized. So like, if you have something that's on a scale of decimal, zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.10 is the value, and then have another feature that's 1,000 to 5,000. Well, if those aren't normalized to each other, one will blow the other one away every time. So
Yeah.
And then unstructured data, like we talked about the General Electric GE situation, how you can use, well, now you can use language models to help consolidate unstructured data. But managing and mitigating the potential train wrecks of making a bad decision on unstructured data when you think you understand it, but you don't, right? So, like, I think those are the big things. But I think that time is the biggest one. More and more engineers are utilizing kind of meta in a way, like they're using Claude code to help them get up to speed faster, which is great. I mean, it does implement some security concerns, so you want to have someone that
Hmm.
knows what they're doing look at it. But I think it's democratizing the ability to help teams get results faster versus trying to what we had to do 10 years ago, which is like we had to build all these models ourselves. We had to train them ourselves. We're using like NumPy, scikit-learn, matplotlib, like all the old school Python libraries, and then you'd put it in the cloud for a little bit and you'd run it and it would cost you thousands of dollars and then you'd build a
Yep.
model off of it. You don't have to do that anymore. Like you can use these other tools to do it. So that's great. But I think the big thing is setting expectations. And sometimes we get over exuberant too. I'm like, man, we can do this in this amount of time. And I fall victim to Hofstadter's principle, even when I know and I know better. How about you? Are you experiencing something similar?
Actually, we have seen that it is a bit of a, how do I say it? It's a bit of a different. We need to try and bring down their expectations. Everyone wants their own ChatGPT,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
them, okay, like that's not possible. First of all, neither of us have
Millions of
$1 billion.
dollars.
But what we can do is leverage what's already built and use
Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
train on your market data, on your company's data. Yeah. But I did want to like pivoting that into what companies always expect. Like I just said, they want their own ChatGPT. They all expect AI, but they don't know how to implement it. If a company chooses to ignore the need for approachable AI and continues with these outdated analytics, what do you think is the most severe consequence that they could face?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you're right on. Like I think a lot of executives and leaders are like, "Oh, well, just sprinkle AI on the problem and it'll fix it." And it won't, right? And if anything, you can potentially make the problem worse, or you can make a worse decision, or you collect the wrong data and you collect vanity metrics. And then like what starts to happen is there was a concept a couple of years back. We were working with an Internet of Things business. Really fun. But this whole phrase, I think Cisco started coining it, like data is oil. It's the new oil. We need to collect as much data as possible. Yeah, like, so they were like really pushing, like, oh, we just need to collect all this data and we can do really interesting things with it. That's not true. That can be, well, in most cases, that's not true. That can be a real fast way to get into very expensive big query bill. And like when you have an IoT system, and you have or a marketing team and you're generating like billions of data points a day potentially of information, like it's going somewhere and like your database is growing and growing and growing and growing, and if it's in the cloud it gets really really expensive, and then if somebody on your team is doing analytics on a read write replica of that, that means that's actually you're doing it twice. So your bill isn't growing linearly, it's actually an exponential problem. And so if you're collecting all that data, it's like having a storage locker. In the United States, a lot of people have storage lockers where they have so much shit that they have to go put it in the place that they're paying for to store their stuff. And now you're
Hmm.
paying $100 a month to store $200 worth of stuff. Okay. But after a year, you just spent $1,200 to get $200, keep $200 of value. I think a lot of people run into that when they're collecting data. It's like they want to do analytics on something, but they don't set the goal. And I think up
Yes.
front, it's like, hey, what are we trying to achieve? Let's nail that first. And then we say, what information, what needs to be true to achieve that?
Hmm.
What data can we collect? Where does it live? How do I integrate it? You go that way versus the approach that a lot of executives want to do, which is let's collect all the data and sprinkle AI. It's like
Yeah.
that's a really expensive way. And so people are like, we'll see. It's like, you will, yeah, I guess. But what are you going to see is unclear. There's a quote from Alice in Wonderland, Cheshire Cat, and it's like, if you don't know where you're going, any direction will get you there. And we leverage that one a lot. It's like, what does success look like at that point? And if you don't define what you're trying to achieve, to your point, you can spend a lot of time. And some of these AI projects, even with the Claude codes and like the LLMs, they can get very expensive, very fast.
Absolutely.
And if you go
Yeah.
down, you have a team of 10 engineers working on that for a year, it's $2 million problem. But did you get $2 million of value out of that? Right. And if the answer is
Yeah.
no, you didn't define your goal effectively.
No, absolutely. And it really just comes down to what you said earlier as well, right? Like, what's today looking like? What do you want tomorrow looking like? And how do
Yeah,
we
yeah,
get
yeah.
there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Well, going into nanochomp for a bit. What is the one thing that has to go right for nanochomp to hit its biggest goals in 2026? And what is the single biggest constraint?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So the things that have to go right, we have to keep delivering for our clients. And I was talking with somebody just the other day about this.
Hmm.
The philosophical question of what do you do? Not like what does a company do? Because we help product and marketing teams unlock growth with data. So, and we do that by putting it together. We like to really implement data driven systems. We use agile processes and we use approachable AI. So that's how we put strategies together. And so, but the bigger philosophical question is like, what do you do as an individual in a day? Like, how are you providing value? And
Yeah.
ultimately, it's how we look at problems, how we think about problems, how we workflow problems. So for us, continuing to do that, putting data systems in place and helping teams achieve the highest impact things is the most important. Like that needs to go right for us. And for us, our data systems, our internal data systems have to be on point. We can't have sloppy workflows. Like everything has to be tight and buttoned up and clean. And we got to the point where probably what you're doing as well. Like you have to build on the backs of the people that are building the best tools. So we have to learn what's in the marketplace. If we're going to build a mobile app, I'm not going to say, all right, well, let me fire up Swift and build this from scratch. My team's not going to do that. Like you absolutely could, but we're going to look to a tool like Flutterflow, right? It's like, it works really well. We can build up what I like to, people call them MVPs, minimum viable products. If we're building those, I call them paper airplanes. Like, what is
Hmm.
something I can spool up fast and test today? And I'm going to use Flutterflow. I'm going to use Firebase. If I'm doing an AI LLM, I'm going to use Pinecone. I'm going to find out which building blocks I need. So for us, it's knowing what building blocks we need to be able to solve the most common problems and being able to find the missing building blocks to solve the outlier problems. So having a very, very good grasp of that needs to always go right for us. And then to your point, what gets in the way of scaling? I think with a small entrepreneurial team, you're always, especially when you're doing client services, you end up in this trap. It's this sine wave, and it's like you're in business development mode. You're trying to capture new client base and onboard new clients, and then you got them onboarded, and you have your sustaining team, and you're working with them, and you got everything working and firing all cylinders, and then you get a little capacity, and so now you're in execution mode, and then I got to get back into business development mode. So you're always kind of oscillating between the two without a
Absolutely.
dedicated team to do either, right? And I think, if I have that magic wand to wave, I would split those roles a little more effectively than we've been doing. But it's like, well, I got this person who's really good at this, and I need them in the strategy role, but they're also really good at onboarding clients, so I need them in that role. So you end up stretching people a lot further than you should. And that's tough because you're relying a lot on your people to accomplish a lot. And especially as a founder, you're stretched more than you need to be. And like there's an overused quote. So you end up working in your business versus on your business. But in
I was
our line
just
of
about
work,
to say
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's tough, right? It's tricky. But in our line of work, there's this point of when can I effectively hand it off to a resource who can accomplish at the level and deliver value at the level that I need. And that comes back to those workflows we talked about. It's like, how do we make what we call a dog with a note workflow? How do I make it easy to onboard somebody? And so everything we do now, kind of like a lot of software teams, if you're building a software product, you start building in the APIs while you're building it to make it easy for people to connect. I think about that a lot when I'm doing something. If I'm executing something, I need to build it into a workflow that somebody else can replicate if I'm gone. And
Yeah.
that's important to my team. I think about that a lot as I'm not that I'm like at the geriatric age yet, but like if I'm gone tomorrow, there's a problem. Right. And so like how do I
Yeah.
make it so it's not a problem?
Yeah, I think about that a lot, even in my own company. Whenever I am onboarding someone, the first thing I ask is I ask myself, what do I do? And then I just write that down into a Google Word doc. Like, okay, step one, hit the Windows button, or like hit the start button, and I go and I look for this application, and I try and drill it down so much. Then I probably put it into ChatGPT and be like, make this an SOP.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then
That's
if I need
good.
to onboard, yeah, and if I want to onboard someone, I'll be like, this is the SOP. This is exactly how I do it. If you have any questions, I'm here. And, if you think that there's a better way to do it, let me know because I know there's definitely inefficiencies in the way that I work. And a lot of the times they'll be like, oh, yeah, yeah, you could do this instead of something like that. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, yeah. Like when you think about how, yeah, you build the workflow to be prescriptive, but you give the freedom for someone else to, like, hey, look, this is the goal, this is the outcome we're getting. These are the steps I'm taking in between to get there. But when you figure out how to change that recipe, that's even better. And I think a lot of mistakes people make when they hire, mistake I used to make all the time when I hired, not for our own business, but when I was in corporate world, I'd interview people and you immediately like people like you, right? So, you're immediately like, oh man, I need someone that has it. Oh, they got an engineering background. Awesome. Like, great. Oh, they went to a university. They went to U of M. Great. Like, so they're already ticking boxes and you like this person because they came from where you came from. So I think about that. And then I'm like, oh, I need someone that can do all the things I can do. And it's like, no, not really. I need somebody that can do this thing better than me. And then I need somebody that can do this thing better than me. Or
Yeah,
even 80% is good as I do it. Great. Even but now I don't have to do it anymore and it's gonna get done. That's sweet. But getting to the point where you can do that is actually really hard. And I think a
absolutely.
lot of people worry about it. I don't know how
Yeah.
you feel. I guess you have, you're in Australia, right? So you're in the same time zone as a lot of the Asian software development labor. And now in the United States, we're looking at Peru. Peru and Argentina has a lot of
Mhm.
really good talent that's really cost effective to achieve goals. Are you seeing a lot of that?
Actually, no, I haven't really outsourced a lot of stuff out there, but we tend to be ahead of them as well. So
Sure.
when it's like 9 a.m. for me, it will be like 5 a.m., 4 a.m. for them. So for
Right.
that,
Yeah.
like it will still take a couple hours for them to log on and like, answer a few and answer any questions that we have, which I don't really mind as long I usually give my team like a 24-hour leeway before they need to be responding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you just made synchronous work.
Yeah, yeah,
What
absolutely.
tools do you
And
guys use? Go ahead, sorry.
well, it's usually just Slack, email, WhatsApp is a very big thing. It's just
Yeah, sure.
very easy on the phone because even when I'm traveling, my partner bought me like these Ray-Ban Meta glasses for my birthday like 2 weeks ago. And when I'm driving or like when I'm like just walking around, I I'll get a notification just on the glass saying, "Hey, you got a text from this person." And if it's something really quick, I'll be like, just Meta read it to me, and if I can respond, I
Mm,
will respond, but it's very, very easy on the go. So I would actually recommend that if you ever
yeah.
have the bandwidth.
I think, a couple well, gosh, more than a couple years back now, it'll be like 20 years now, Google had this Google Glass thing that was pretty silly, and it was just ahead of its time, and I think,
Mm,
we're deviating a little bit, but when you think about the use cases for Meta glasses or for, Google Glass, I think a lot of people underestimate how valuable they could be for a manufacturing tool. Like, if you're in a
absolutely.
manufacturing line, yeah, like, it and you look up and you see I was in the automotive world, right? Hexavalent chromium bolts. So you look up and you see all the bolt bins, and then one highlights green in your vision, and then you pull the bolt out of it, and then it recognizes it and it removes it from the inventory. And then it shows you on your workpiece where you need to place it, and it shows you the torque value. And then you torque it,
Mhm.
go turns green, and then I pass the part down. I think like that's really a valuable use case that's
It
underutilized.
it really is. I don't know about you, but, like, I think the reason I became an engineer was because I watched Iron Man as a kid.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And every day I'm trying to get a little bit closer to that because I have a smart home as well. So like my blinds are all like opening automatically and stuff. But yeah, sorry, we're segueing a fair bit.
Yeah.
What are your top two or three strategic goals for NanoChomp over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, what we're doing over the next couple of months, strategic goals outside of the Captain Obvious ones of more money, lower costs, right? Like more revenue, lower cost. I think the big strategic goals for us are we have a bunch of really great frameworks that we deploy into clients. And we've, over the years, have shifted from we'll give you a huge proposal and you go dig through it and we redline it back and forth and then we have a statement of work and we go forward. What we've done is we've shifted towards, I guess, what you'd call a productized services. Phase zero is this, phase one is this, phase two is this, phase three is this. Like, and then we have another list of services. That's what it costs. And we don't negotiate on price. We really negotiate on scope. So like a lot of people will be like, I need $500 off. And it's like, well, great. Well, we'll reduce the scope to match your need if you need it or whatever it is. But one of the things that we're pushing for this coming year, 2026, is we've been doing a lot of one-off projects where we build something inside of a Docker container and deploy it locally on a customer. We're going to do a lot more software as a service. So there are
I
probably
see.
three big products that we're going to self-host, turn software as a service, and then do the integrations and self-host it. We've avoided it for a lot of reasons. But back to what you and I have talked about, it's like anything goes wrong at the client side, all of a sudden I'm staring at a $20,000 AWS bill because something
Yeah.
was replicating data, right? So we've avoided that. But now that we've matured enough to the point where we can mitigate those risks. We can guarantee uptime for certain things. That's the other thing. It's like if a tool goes down and you're on a lean team and I'm on an airplane and someone's messaging me, oh my God, this is down. I need this up because it's production critical. Well, now what? Right. So we wanted to make sure we had all those now what's in place. But that's going to be a big component of our next year is that. And helping our clients get more value repeatedly and
Hmm.
making them be able to achieve more with leaner resources because, we're seeing a lot of people tightening up resources, but it can be an opportunity because marketing spend decreases, which means that our ability to get where we need to be with marketing spend and get eyeballs gets more advantageous for our clients. So I think those are the big things. Focus on SaaS, focus on continued efficiencies, focus on making more things workflows. And we haven't even probably talked about this too much, but when we're building out workflows, if we can automate them, we do. So we're automating, I guess, taking our own advice and automating more of our own work versus our clients' work. So we use a handful of tools to do that.
Yeah. No, actually, that my next question was actually going to be what's something that we need to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
That's a good one. The world's our oyster here. I think that question makes me think of this that entrepreneurship is really pointing limited resources at unlimited possibilities, right? And that's kind of where that question takes us. But I think one of the things we haven't talked about yet is what is your favorite tool for automation? Like, do you have a favorite automation platform right now that you're using to help automate workflows? I've got one in mind if you don't.
I like string.io and N8N.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we use
What about you?
N for N8N. So we've been using N8N a lot. It's kind of, if anyone doesn't know, it's kind of like think if this, then this, but overpowered on steroids, can do a ton of stuff, has webhooks. Like, it's pretty incredible what you can do with that tool. You can replace sales resources for lead generation. You can do a lot, right? Really, really impressive stuff. But I think that's a good one. And I think I got a question for you. What books or other pieces of media are you have your attention right now?
That is very, in terms of books, I think I reread Atomic Habits a lot, like every 6 months to try and reinforce everything into me. And that's about in terms of books. In terms of content and videos, I'm always just looking at AI automations,
Mm-hmm.
how to implement some for my own business, like just to make my life a bit easier and how I can look at my current clients, look at what I'm giving them. And sometimes I just feed that data into like a small agentic AI and I just say, you're like the CEO of this company. We're looking after this client. This is what we do for them. How
Mm-hmm.
can we make it better? How can we ensure retention? How can we ensure like exceed client expectations, etc.? That is something that because client satisfaction is the best metric for any
Yeah.
company. So that is something that I'm really, really keen on learning. But yeah,
Yeah. I think
go on.
taking those little agentic AI tools that you're mentioning, like I think that's an underrated skill that there's a concept of hiring a solution, right? And it's like when people are buying something, a service or a product, it's like they have a problem and they're hiring someone else to do it. Like I don't, whether it's mowing your lawn or whatever it is, you're looking for someone to solve that problem for you. And if you can make micro SaaS agentic AI solutions that consistently deliver, it doesn't have to be this massive crazy thing. It doesn't have to be Notion, right? It can be a really small focused thing that someone can pay $3 for and solve a problem repeatedly. I think that's going to be a big deal over the next year. I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things back to the books and media, a book that I read a lot is called Loon Shots, Loonshots. It's a really good book and it talks about the change of like the way the world's changed and like how innovation thrives in places where you wouldn't necessarily expect, and then how innovation dies in places where you wouldn't expect. So it's really interesting. It talks about like the invention of radar, it talks about flight, it talks about a Nokia. So like Nokia, like, do you know what their first product was? It's fascinating.
I remember reading about it somewhere, and it's something super weird. I actually don't
Rubber
remember. It's
boots.
eluding me.
Yeah,
Rubber
it's
boots.
rubber boots. And so they made rubber boots, and then from there, they made rubber coats for farmers, and then they made rubber tires for farmers. So they were myopically focused on the farmer, right? Again, in Scandinavia. Then from there, they made walkie-talkies. So they're for farmers to communicate, right? Of course, right? They're just gonna if you are a farmer, you're buying all your stuff from Nokia. Then obviously they became the largest cellular phone company on the planet. And they basically got bought and went bankrupt, right? Like gone, like completely wiped out. So what happened? And like Loon Shots, I won't spoil it for you, but Loon Shots talks about that whole arc and like why did innovation die? Like this company went from boots to phones because they were innovating all the way up to solve a customer problem, and then they got a golden goose and they didn't want to let it go. So they talk about that. It's a fascinating book. They talk about Kodak. They talk about the sonar and radar. Really great. So I do that one, and then there's another one that you can probably rip through in an hour. It's called Flatland. And
Flat.
Flatland, yeah, it's one word, Flatland, and it's not a business book or anything like that. It's sci-fi, and it's old. I think it's like 1800s is when it was or written. And the whole concept is it's in a world where it's on two dimensions. There's no third dimension, and there's a dimension that's only one dimension, and they explain all the different shapes that people have, so you can know what area they're in. But if you're a square, you can't tell the difference if someone's a triangle if the point's facing you. So it has to,
Mhm.
it's really weird stuff. So what's interesting is how do you explain if you're from the three-dimensional space, how do you go to the two-dimensional space and explain to those people what the third dimension looks like? You can't. It's impossible. It's impossible to visualize. And so I think about that a lot because, like, as humans or as even data scientists, we've got X, Y, Z. We got the Cartesian coordinates and time. So you got four dimensions. And if you're graphing it as a data scientist, you can use size of color. You can use a few other things. You can sneak in five dimensions on a graph. That's
Mhm.
it. And so when we're thinking about k-means clustering, or you're thinking about large language models that have 15,000 dimensions, a billion parameters, you're talking about a vector space that isn't three, four, five dimensions, thousands, tens of thousands. How do you can't visualize it? Doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
not there. So I think about that a lot. And I think about that like when I'm trying to build something like what am I not, what exists, what's there that I'm just not seeing because I'm not in that framework. So that book is kind of fun if you want 1.5 hour mental break.
I would definitely do that. But Derek, thank you so much for your time today. It was incredibly insightful to chat and learn about the Bytes framework, the challenges of cultural resistance to agile, the power of approachable AI. It's been absolutely incredibly enlightening to learn from you. I can't wait to see the heights that nanochomp reaches next year. And I'd love to catch up in this sometime in the future and discuss as well.
Love it, man. Really excited. Thank you so much for having me on. Can't wait to work together and talk more in the future.